All right, so how many of you have had a spiritual discussion with someone recently? Where's Ned? I know Ned did because he just talked about it with me. Anybody else? Of any kind, sort, or variety. It doesn't have to be like I gave them the 4 spiritual laws and they dropped to their knees and they asked Jesus into their heart. It doesn't have to be like that. But anybody have one? Anybody have a recent discussion? How did you feel when you had a recent discussion? Or if you haven't had a recent discussion, thinking about having a spiritual discussion with someone, what are some words that come to mind when you think about having a spiritual discussion with someone? Am I smart enough to do this? That's a good one. What's something else? A word association. Nervous? Okay. Even the Van Beekum gets nervous when talking to people. That's saying something right there. Good. Am I smart enough to do this? Nervous, Justin?
Rejection and disinterest.
Rejection and disinterest. Yeah, absolutely. Is it safe to say that not a lot of us are comfortable having those conversations all the time? Maybe some of us shy away from having those conversations sometimes. I, myself, sometimes shy away from having those conversations. You know, you feel that Holy Spirit nudge where they kind of give you that opening and you're like, yeah, but and you kind of back down, right? We all feel that. I was at a conference one time many, many years ago, and John Piper was there, and he was talking about being on the airplane with somebody, and he said, yeah, it came up, and I waited till like way too long in the flight, and it finally came up, and I just totally blew it. And I'm like, Piper blew it. Like, if Piper can blow it, like anybody can blow it, right? But nobody's going to have all of the answers, right? And so I don't want you to think that what we're doing here today is going to equip you to give you all of the answers. But what we want to do is make you more confident. First and foremost in what you believe, but secondly, to maybe grow in our ability to have some of those conversations. So in your handouts, if you like fill in the blanks, this is your day. And you can see the schedule. This first session, we're going to be talking about worldview, apologetics, and the truth. It's going to be a little bit of an introduction. And I apologize to some of my students who might be here because this is going to sound duplicative to them, but they know all the answers already, all right? But we'll talk about first, what is apologetics? And sometimes people think apologetics means apologizing for something. That is not what apologetics is. There is examples of what we're talking about, and the Greek word we're looking at is apologia. And apologia means to give a defense. It doesn't matter whether that's a defense of your innocence. We can look at a passage like Acts 22:1, where Paul says before the crowd, brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make to you. So an apologia could just be a defense. Could be a defense about anything. We see it in Acts 25:16, where again, Paul says, I answered them that it was not the custom of the Romans to give up anyone before the accused met the accusers face to face and had an opportunity to make his defense. And so in reality, it's just a defense. And when we talk about it, we talk about it as a defense of the faith. Talk about what we believe. So if there's one word to describe apologetics, it's obviously defense. And what we are talking about specifically here is a defense of the faith. There's a very key verse in 1 Peter 3:15, which we kind of call our apologetic Great Commission, which many of you will know, but this is what we base a lot on. 1 Peter 3:15 says, but in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a apologia, there's our word, to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason, for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. What are some words that come to mind that jump out at us as to what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it based on that verse? Let me read it again, if I can, without my glasses. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that's in you, yet do it with anger and vitriol, especially on Facebook. Hi. I was talking with Kenny before, the idea of Facebook is like, the social media is like the worst place to defend your faith. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it's usually not very effective because, well, we all know what happens on social media, right? But what are some things that jump out at us from 1 Peter 3:15 as to, A, what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it? To anyone. Anyone and everyone. Very good. Anyone. What else? What are some other things? What we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it?
Well, do it with gentleness and respect.
Do it with gentleness and respect, right? That, guys, is becoming increasingly more difficult because I don't know if you know this or not, Christians are no longer the cool kids. I'm not sure we ever were. And people automatically, some of them, honestly, will just hate your guts because you're a Christian, because you claim the name of Christ. So you could be trying to be gentle and respectful, but maybe the person you're talking to is not. That makes it very, very difficult. Good. What are some more things we can learn about what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to do it from 1 Peter? Be prepared. Absolutely. And this is part of what you're doing today. So A+ for everybody. You're getting prepared in there and how to do that. There's one more really key thing right in the beginning of verse 15. Always, okay, I like that. Back a little farther up. What are we supposed to do first and foremost? Or what's our prerequisite for all of this, right? Yeah, what Barb's saying. Make sure that Christ, that you have set apart Christ in your own hearts as holy. In other words, you're not doing it to win an argument. You're not doing it to be a jerk. And let's talk about the most basic prerequisite, right? You need to be a Christian in order to do this. Okay? Some people just like to argue. Are there any people in here that just like to argue for the sake of arguing? You're going to be a great debater someday. Yeah, and that's not the idea we're going for. This has to come from our hearts. And it has to come from our hearts that are set apart in love of God and love of other people, right? Going back to the first and second greatest commandments. And so we're defending why we have the hope that we have in Jesus. And a practical definition of what we're doing is we're equipping the church to confidently do that. That's what we're doing here. We're equipping the church to do that. We want you guys to have confidence to defend what you feel in your hearts. Because I'm guessing if you're here, you believe it in your hearts as true. And I hope if you're at Highlands Bible Church, you would also believe it in your hearts as true. And so you're really defending why it's true. Why do I believe it's true? So the goal of apologetics then, down the bottom of that slide there, 2 goals. You won't be surprised. One of them is evangelism, and the other one is equipping the church. And a lot of people blow right past the evangelism part. Like, we talk about sharing our faith, and we have all this pressure. Like, when I was in youth group 130 years ago, like, they just witness to your friends, witness to your friends, witness to your friends. It's like, okay, but it just didn't make sense in my brain. But we are called, as in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, to go and make disciples of all nations. And we're called to do that through evangelism. And evangelism sometimes gets separated from apologetics. But apologetics is really evangelism. What we're doing is we're sharing, as 1 Peter said, the reason for the hope that we have inside us. That's evangelism, guys. So don't separate those two things. They're really the same thing. And if you evangelize, and if you're talking to somebody about Jesus or the Bible, usually they're going to have questions about the Bible, about the gospel. And knowing the answers to those questions is part of being equipped for apologetics. And that goes along with the second part, which is equipping the church. That's part of what we do here and part of why I love doing what I do. We read a verse like Ephesians 4, starting in verse 11. We're going to get to that day soon, guys. We're going to have to bring reading glasses to the pulpit. It's going to happen. I can take them off dramatically, and like bite the end of them or something. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, So in other words, what we're called to do is directly in line with our mission at Highlands Bible Church to evangelize, in other words, making disciples, and to mature disciples in equipping them. Okay, so those are our goals for apologetics, evangelism and equip the church. Has anybody had any other interactions with apologetics, and any other words come to mind? Or maybe some of you, that's the first time you're hearing that term, but anybody who's familiar with that term, any other words come to mind when you think about the word apologetics? You think about that word, anything come to mind? Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, knowing why you believe what you believe.
Okay.
You're not just, it's kind of like the reasons why, and being able to
Yeah.
explain that to someone when they ask.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would say I get impressed just watching YouTube videos of seeing people that are apologetics go and
Yeah.
throw out Bible verses and explain their position.
Yeah.
You sit there and all going, wow.
Yeah. You're not the only one. I sit there and look at all, and some of these guys are just like, gosh, how he just walked him through that was so unbelievable and good and helpful. Yep. And let's get that square right from the start. We are not going to know all the answers. We're never going to know all the answers. And if you have someone who continues to ask and continues to push and push, one of the best things you can say is, if I gave you enough proof, if I gave you all of the evidence that you could ever want to believe, would you actually believe? And sometimes people, if they're really honest, they'll say no. And so then why are we having this conversation, right? You've made up your mind, that's fine. But you're asking me for evidence, and in your heart, you're biased against that evidence, and you're not going to believe it. So, yeah, we're not going to have all the answers. And so hopefully that takes a lot of pressure off. And I don't know, let me get back to you, is a fantastic answer to somebody's questions. And then get back to them. Okay? But sometimes when people think of apologetics, they think about like somebody trying to pick a fight. Somebody trying to prove a point. Somebody trying to start an argument. And sometimes they think, well, we really shouldn't be doing that, because you can't argue someone into the kingdom, can you? I mean, yeah, so sometimes it gets a bad rap. So that's why I want to start with this foundation of apologetics and introduction to it, okay? What we also want to move on to is specifically worldview apologetics. Now, worldview is a way of processing the world that shapes how we live in it. Does everyone have a worldview, whether they know it or not? Yeah, they do. Some people, I think a lot of people, have this kind of hodgepodge version of a worldview. I call it like a buffet. Like, you ever go through a buffet and you're just like, I'll have some of the salad, I'll have some of the meatballs, I'll have some of the macaroni and cheese. I think people just naturally go through life and they pick up, oh, that sounds good. I'll take that from the church and the Bible and Jesus. I'll take that from just some self-help guy I saw on YouTube. I'll take that from Buddhism. I'll take that, and they just kind of load up their plate, and voila, that's their worldview that they've cobbled together. Do you think most people actually think about their worldview and what it looks like? Probably not, right? Especially Americans. It's just kind of, we go through, we just do our thing. But everyone, yes, everyone does have a worldview, even if they don't realize it. Tim Keller calls it a narrative identity. And it's how you make sense. It's your story. When stuff happens, right? Good, bad, and ugly, how you are making sense of them. Everybody's forced to make sense of things. When I officiate a funeral, it sounds weird, but it's one of the my favorite things to do. Why? Because I have a captive audience right there who is looking at a body in a casket, who is forced to think about death and forced to think about their worldview. Why did this happen? Where am I going when I die? What is death? Is there anything afterwards? Like, they're forced to come to terms with that. So those times are very, very helpful in that help you process those things, whether good, bad, or ugly, but also things happening in the news. When another mass shooting happens, how do we process that? How do we make sense of that? Parents, what do you do when your kids ask or your grandkids ask? Things in our lives. Why did I get cancer? Why did I or did not I win the lottery? Why can't I meet a spouse? And all of the current political items that are in, well, they're really moral items, but they're being used as political items. Abortion. Would it make sense of abortion or not? What do we do with the whole LGBTQ thing? All of those things are part of our worldview that pass through our filters. And so what do we then calibrate our filters with? We've got to calibrate our filters with the Word of God. There are some common worldview questions. Every worldview seeks to answer the same common or universal questions. And the first one is, who am I? In other words, identity. How might other people, not of course biblically literate, mature believers like yourselves, but other people, the people out there, how might other people come to understand their identity? What are some things that people could say, this is who I am? What's that? Money? Okay. I'm rich. I'm rich. I have a lot of money, or I have no money, right? Or I'm poor. Yeah, that's definitely one of the ways. What's another way somebody can define themselves with? Race, yep. Ethnicity. Social group, absolutely. How they spend their time, yep. Hobbies and things like that, yep. There was a fellow I was talking to one time, and he was a retired guy. He gave me his business card, and I was thinking of that because it was literally like, 10 bullets on the one side of the card of everything that he did. I build model airplanes. I do this. I do that. And it's just like, okay, he's just made his whole identity of this is who I am right on the front of that business card. Yeah, what we do. What else? What else can be our identity? Career? Absolutely. Depending on your career, you could absolutely have that as your identity. Yeah. Yeah. Sexual preference is a huge one. And we're going to talk about that in the last session, how that is not an identity, right? But we could also look at our background or our family, or maybe the way that we are, saying, well, I'm that way because of my upbringing. I'm that way because of my family. That's just how we are, right? Ever hear that before? It's sometimes a little frustrating. It's like, well, you're not locked into that as your whole identity. You could be because of a problem in your life. I'm sick, or I'm an alcoholic, or I'm this, or I'm that. What does the Bible say about our identity? Jesus. Everybody's like, Jesus. Yeah, that we are created by God, that He loves us, and He's created as one of the creeds says, right? Created to love Him and enjoy Him forever. That's who we are, and that's where that goes back to the beginning of Genesis. If you don't know that God's your creator, and you don't know He loves you, and you don't know what He's called you to do, how are you supposed to do things that God's called us to? So every worldview would include an answer to who am I? Second question every worldview would answer is, what is my purpose in life? In other words, what do you think the goal is of human life? How would other people answer that question? What is the goal of my life? They wake up in the morning and they say, as long as this happens, it was a successful day. What? Healthy and happy. That's like the universal American creed, right? You got to do what you got to do to be happy. Like, it's all about being happy and being healthy. Yeah, that could be a great way to define your purpose. What other things come to mind of what your purpose in life is outside of a biblical worldview?
I've read it a lot. It's wake up, go to work, pay taxes, and die.
Yeah, kind of that. It's a real encouraging worldview, right? That kind of fatalistic worldview. It's like, oh, well, you wake up in the morning, you go to work, you pay taxes, and one day you get to die. Cool. It's great. That makes me want to get out of bed for sure. What else? What do you think other things could be from your non-biblical worldview purpose in life? What would they say? What would your neighbors or your family say? What's that? Yeah. Go to college, get a good job. Absolutely, that's important. Make tons of cash, be financially stable. That's your purpose, right? Be a good person. There it is. And then, of course, we have to say, what's good? How do you define the good? You need a standard to define the good, because what I say is good is going to be different than someone else's standard of good. Right? Your purpose in life could be to stay healthy. We certainly see plenty of people knocking themselves out to be healthy at all costs. Maybe somebody needs a cause to fight for. That's their central identity, is they need this cause, whatever that might be. If you're a vegan, or you're a prepper, or you want to go off grid, if you want to save nature and hug trees, if you want to just protest everything that you could possibly protest, you could have a cause. The cause of a Christian life is to glorify God by becoming more like Him. That's what our Christian purpose is. All right, so the third question then is, what went wrong? What would the sin? See, now you jumped into the biblical worldview. You're right. Sin is what went wrong. But what would a non-biblical worldview say? The average American that you meet, what's wrong with this world? My parents. If they only did X, Y, Z, or if I only had parents, or if I only had a mom or a dad or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. A political party. Absolutely. It's an election year, right? It's in the air that we breathe right now. It's so thick. It's just like, well, it's because of these Democrats, because of these Republicans, and these crazy other people, right? Definitely. What else? Ed? Blaming other people. The perennial victim, right? Never their fault, not a lot of responsibility. It's just because of my parents, or it's because of where I was born, or what I could do, or all the things that went wrong, or this, that, and the other thing, and that's what went wrong. Yeah. What else? Any others? DEI is what went wrong. I'm sure we would say that. And it's funny, the world is starting to say that too, as you see all the corporations that are abandoning their DEI nonsense. Yeah. I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be corporate greed, right? Ruining the economy. It could be pollution ruining the environment. It could be my preconditioning from where I was born or whatever else. It could be even us, right? The Christians are what's wrong with this world, trying to force their morality. Is that what you're going to say? Oh, cool. Exactly. Well, yeah. That's for real, man. People don't like us, and they think we're the problem. We think we are what went wrong in this world. Yeah. What is absolutely wrong is that we lost Christ, and right. Of course, from a Christian worldview, we know exactly, and somebody said it right away, it is sin that is what has done. That's what went wrong, right? Not anything else. Not it's too many guns or not enough guns or whatever it is. It's sin, right? So what then is the solution? What would a non-biblical world say is the solution to the problem? What do we have to do? Follow your heart. Oh, reliable, right? Well, yeah. Just do what you got to do. Look out for you, man. You got to do what you got to do to make yourself happy. Yeah, follow your heart. What else would somebody say is a non-biblical worldview solution to the problem? Government. Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Get the right person in office. Get the right policies. Get the whatever. New political system. Move to Canada. Whatever it is. Yeah. And of course, communism, socialism, whatever it is, if we can get the right things in place, that could be what fixes us. We look back on things sometimes with regret and just say, if only I had done this, then everything would have been better in my life. A lot of people are defined by that. Like there are one or two moments in life where they zigged when they should have zagged, they think, and now the rest of their life is ruined forever. If I had only done that, next time I'm going to do that. Right? Covetousness, the case of the if-onlys. If only I have this, then everything will be okay. If only I have more money. If only I have a spouse. If only I have a different spouse. If only I have whatever the case may be. I was not using that as an example. Whatever, if only. Then that's what I need. Of course, managing your life or your career or your health or whatever to the max. That's what we need. That's what will do it. What does a Christian worldview say is the answer? Now it's really time for the Sunday school answer. Jesus. That's the real answer, right? We know what went wrong, and we know that Jesus is the one who provided the answer to that. And Jesus provided and paid for the sin on the cross, and that we trust in him. We have new identity and a new life in Christ. So ultimately, this is about the search for truth. When we talk about a worldview, we talk about a search for truth. And that gets us, well, we'll talk about truth in a little bit, but let's see where we are here, if I can do this right. All right, let's look at some worldview centers and their ideas of the world. And we've talked about it in a general sense, but let's hone in on three. There's three buckets that I've named: atheism, selfism, and theism. And so let's see how an atheistic worldview would mean. Atheistic obviously means no God, atheos. They don't believe in God at all. There's no God in the center of it all. Therefore, there's no higher power. There's no central purpose in life. Most of that time, as my 8th grade students know, it's a materialistic view. It's just a natural view. Whatever we see out there in science and data and facts, that's it. That's what we got. Yep, we'll get there. Yep, that's probably more selfism, but yeah, they could. Well-known atheist Dawkins said this. This is a very encouraging quote for us on a Saturday morning. The universe we observe has precisely the properties they should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. That is what a PhD would tell you the universe is all about. And another famous atheist, Bertrand Russell, would say, we must build our lives on the firm foundation of unyielding despair. So it's basically saying, there's nothing out there, people. There's no higher power. There's no purpose holding all this together, so just go live your life. Yeah, you have some days and they stink. It's just the way that it is. Deal with it. Yet, they know something. Here's the deal with the atheistic worldview, is nobody can actually live like an atheist. And we're going to talk about why in a little bit. Romans 1 tells us that they know God exists, but they suppress that knowledge with the truth of they suppress the truth by their unrighteousness. C.S. Lewis has a great quote, because if you don't know, C.S. Lewis went through all of these worldviews. C.S. Lewis used to be a raging atheist, and this is what he said, looking back at his time as an atheist. He said, I was at this time living like so many atheists or anti-theists, in a whirlwind of contradictions. I maintained that God did not exist, but I was also very angry with God for not existing. I was also equally angry with him for creating a world. And so here was a man who's wrestling through his, how do you be an atheist? How do you walk outside and be an atheist? I mean, that's in you. That's in your soul. And C.S. Lewis put that together. So atheism would say there's nothing at the center. There is nothing at the center of a worldview. There's no person, there's no purpose, there's nothing. Selfism would say, as you might expect, that I'm at the center. I am the center of my own worldview. This is kind of the air we breathe here in America. It's about me and what I need to be happy. It's about my family. The number one selling book category in the world year after year is always what? Self-help. How do we improve ourselves? What do we have to do? Other spiritual movements, again, where we are the ultimate determiner of right and wrong, right? As Dawn said, right? Any other spirituality where people, that always ends up kind of focusing on us. How do I improve myself? And this, you start to see, points us in the direction of where we are in 2024 America. If it's all about me and myself and my interpretation of reality, then yes, I can be born with the wrong gender. Or yes, I can deny things that are completely objectively true. Carl Trueman wrote a really good book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. I think I noted it in your footnoted in your notes there. It's a bigger book. He wrote a smaller book called, what's the smaller book called? It'll come to me later. But it's a smaller version of that book because that book is a little intimidating for some. So, Strange New World, thank you. So this is one quote from Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And you could see that topic already. Just that definition of that book is the bullseye for what we're talking about here. He says, for me to be a self, in the sense that I'm using the term here, involves an understanding of what the purpose of my life is, our worldview, of what constitutes the good life, and how I understand myself in relation to others and the world around me. So that's ground zero for what we're talking about. This worldview of selfism is all about me, and everybody revolves around me. There is a rejection of outside objective truth or reality. We're encouraged to question everything, because everything then would have to go through the filter of what? Me. I decide whether or not it's true. You can decide it's true, but that's for you. If I'm a selfism worldview, I decide. And you think, like, how is that possible? Truman says again, today's world is not the objectively authoritative place that it was 800 years ago. We think of it much more as a case of raw material that we can manipulate by our own power to our own purposes. And so his point is, like, 800 years ago, everybody's farming or doing whatever they were doing. You had no doubt that there was a higher power that was controlling the rain and the sun and all that to grow your crops. And you had to submit to it, and that was it. Now we've become so smart and so independent, right, that everything's then up to us. We can manipulate everything, or so we think. So then we've drifted away from that reality of, okay, there's somebody up there who's actually calling the shots. Now saying, I'm the one that calls the shots. And last but not least, we have theism, and not as really a textbook would define it. I should change this. But Christian theism. In other words, the God of the Bible is at the center. And God is independent, and God is the one at the center. God is then, what would be some biblical words we could use to define God? Another word association exercise. If you give us a couple words that the Bible tells us that God is. Sovereign. That's a really, really big word. Right? He's over all things. He's holy. What does holy mean? It means really set apart. You're very smart. Set apart means he's not like us. He's different. And therefore, he's at the center of the world, not us. Yeah, what else? What else do we understand God to be like? Righteous. Absolutely morally pure and righteous. What were you going to say, Ed? All-knowing. Yep, he's omniscient. He knows all things. We don't. That's like a demotion right there, right? We don't know all things. Merciful. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, right? Is that we don't just have a God who is over all things and sovereign over all things and knows all things and is in all places at all times. We have a God that knows us, right? This is the beauty of being what theologians call transcendent and immanent. He's over all things. There's nothing in his universe that he doesn't control and doesn't know. And he is holy, and he is righteous, and he has wrath, and he has the power over life and death and eternity and all of that, yes. But he's not that God in the sense of we're just going to offer a squirrel to him and sacrifice and hope that he's appeased. No, he knows us. He's also immanent. He knows the hairs on our head. I don't have any because it's Saturday, so I shaved them all off, okay? As Walker knows. And so this is theism, right? God is transcendent and immanent. And that is the only religion on the planet that does that. You guys know that? Do you guys realize that? Biblical Christianity is the only worldview where our God is both of those things. He's both over all things and also in us. Every other religion is in either one or two of those buckets. You could worship the God of the sun god and the moon god and the whatever, the volcano god. That's just the God that's over all things, and you better hope he's happy with you. Or you could worship the God that is inside you, where you are kind of the new spiritualist kind of God, and you are all about it. But it's both in the biblical worldview, okay? And that then should be the way we see everything. Again, C.S. Lewis says, I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen, not because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Right? Think about that. When the sun comes up, you don't know the sun came up because like, oh wow, there's a big bright thing in the sky. You know the sun came up because everything else got clear. I was walking the dog this morning, and it gradually got lighter and lighter and lighter. The sun was coming up. I saw everything around me. That's biblical Christianity. It's not just the bright light in the sky. It shows us the worldview of all things around us. Yeah. From C.S. Lewis, I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen. Not because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. And so that is, God then becomes the center of everything. Got a quick slide for us. Now, this is what we're talking about here. This is the theistic worldview. It's not us in the self, or the self is in the center of everything. God is in the center of everything. We turn to a verse in the Bible, so you know I'm not making this up. Verse 11:36 of Romans says, for from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever and ever. And so the biblical worldview is everything is from God and finds its fullest meaning in God. That's what the biblical worldview is. Everything is from God and finds its fullest meaning in God, but yet note that God is separate from everything. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. God is not in and amongst everything. He's not the rocks, the trees, the sun. God is separate from that and sovereign over all things. This is true truth and true knowledge. And we see that we find meaning in all of these things around us. Career, art, music, science. I have career on there twice. Family, money, sex, all of those things that you could make a million more circles that orbit around, but they come from God and they find their fullest meaning in God. That's why those arrows go both ways. Okay? So we have to remember that God is separate from everything. Questions, comments, thoughts? We've got one more little bit to get through here before our first break. All right, let's talk about the last part. We did intro to apologetics. We did intro to worldview. Let's look at truth itself. I know this is crazy, but truth is a statement or belief that matches reality. A statement or belief that matches reality. Okay? What are some examples of an objectively true statement that are really practical that we could think of right here and now? Wow. Okay, men and women are different. Absolutely. You could look around the room and you could see who are the men and who are the women. That should be objectively true. That's awesome. What else? Just anything. Like, is it day or night outside right now? The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? This is a pen, right? This is a pen. We are all at Highlands Bible Church right now. You are sitting at a table. You are listening to me speak. I am here. Those are things that are true because they correspond with reality. Somebody says it's raining outside. How can we check to see if that is true? We go outside. We see if moisture is falling from the sky, or we look outside the window, right? 1 + 1 always equals 2. These things are truth because they match reality. That kind of presents a problem. Well, okay, how do we know what is true? Because some people will say, how do we know what is true then? The Bible, absolutely. The world is going to want to separate truth into two stories. The upper story is going to be things like feelings, things like what is irrational fuzziness, things that are personal, things that are private. That is subjective. In other words, what I determine to be true in my reality, therefore that is true. That's what a secular worldview is going to want to do. That's the upper story. The bottom story is objective. So these are facts. These are rational things. These are scientific data. These are public information, public facts. And so, in other words, this is what happens, and this is our dilemma. That then faith gets interpreted as something that's subjective, something that's squishy and feelings-based, and they regulate that to the top level. Whereas, okay, all you Christians, in all of the ways that you do your things, I'm down here in reality. I'm down here in the real world. It's nice that you have those beliefs about a sky fairy that you think you pray to and give you things, but I'm down here in reality with facts and science. And that's what the worldview is going to, the secular, non-biblical worldview is going to want to regulate us to the top of that diagram there. How do we see this today? We just had one example over here, right? Men and women are different. No. I feel that I'm not a man. That's not a declaration. Don't get nervous. So therefore, that's my truth, right? What else?
That whole live your truth.
Live your truth.
It's your truth, but if it's true to you, then it's true.
Yep. And you see how they come to that, because the truth is then a feeling, right? That's what they would categorize as truth. Ed?
We look at science as that we are learning more, when in actuality, is God is revealing more through science.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Any of the things we see today, right? Abortion. Keep your religious beliefs private. You can't tell me what to believe is true in reality. That's what you believe. Get up there in the top shelf where you belong. Down here in reality, you can't force that on me. Anything. Homosexuality. Again, keep your private religious beliefs out of public schools. We're going to teach LGBTQ, and we're going to be proud about it. If you want to believe it in the privacy of your own home, go ahead and believe it in the privacy of your own home. That doesn't hurt me. But you bring it into the public square? No. Public square, we deal with facts and reality, so sorry. Keep that where it belongs. Has the church contributed to this in any way? The evangelical, non-denominational church, which I'm a part of and also like to pick on all the time. How have we contributed to this two-story version of reality?
There's a lot of churches that will play to the emotional manipulation of feeling God. And when you're in that setting, feel that God's telling you and guiding you when it's really just yourself.
Yep, 100%, right? We have squishy sermons that are like TED Talks that make us feel better about ourselves. We sing Jesus is my boyfriend songs, and the lights are down low, and we have smoke and things that come in to manipulate us emotionally. We have these dynamic speakers, unlike you guys this morning, stuck with me, right? We have all of that that's designed to stir our emotions, and subconsciously, guess where that brings us? Right up to the top of that truth. What about the idea of a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? What about inviting Jesus into your heart? Which is one of the weirdest things that we could say, right? Like, I'm in love with my wife, but I don't know if I invited her into my heart. Let's talk about this a little differently, right?
Well, all those things then puts the onus back on you.
Yep.
And away from God. It makes the Bible me-centered instead of about God.
Yep. Yep.
Once you realize that, it's like a light bulb just kind of goes off.
Yep.
Or like if you're ever in a Bible study and somebody says, what does this verse mean to you?
Yeah. Run away. Correct them, then run away. Yes. Yeah. So we've done this in so many subtle ways in evangelical Christianity. And we've done it because we've drifted away from the Word of God being the authority, which we'll talk about next, We've drifted away from denominations. We've drifted away from creeds and confessions and historical Christianity. We've lost all that. We've drifted all towards this idea of me-centered faith. There's one author who I never remember talked about the difference between cat and dog theology. What happens, you cat people, help me out here. What happens when you get home and you see your cat? Is your cat excited to see you? Does it jump up? And it's usually on your, I've had a couple cats. It's usually on your cat's terms. Cats will be affectionate when they want to be affectionate. Cats will do what they're going to do. What about your dog when you get home? Which is much cooler. Let's all admit that, right? I mean, you could be out for 5 minutes and the dog, they're just like, you're home. It's so cool. That idea is that sometimes we approach God like this cat, that I'm going to approach God on my terms. When I want to interact with God, I'll interact with God. Otherwise, we should sort of be more in the dog camp. I could really expand this into a whole theological argument of why dogs are better than cats. We should be the dogs in this equation. The dog is completely dependent on us, and it knows that. We should be knowing and being joyfully, completely dependent on our God and Creator. But instead, we've shifted this to be about ourselves. I'll go to church on Sunday if there's nothing else to do, right? There's no other sports or no other, maybe I just want to sleep in. Maybe I just want to live stream it. When did that become a verb? I'm just going to live stream it this week. I understand if like your basement floods or your kids are vomiting or something. I get it and I understand. That's why it's there. Right? Please stay home if that's happening. We have Christian carbon copies of everything in the world. On and on and on, right? But the reality is God spoke the whole universe into being, not just 2 stories of it, the whole universe. And Paul Gould wrote a good book called Cultural Apologetics, and he said the church has grown anti-intellectual and feelings-based and out of touch with the relevancy of Jesus and the gospel to contemporary life. So in other words, we've capitulated. We're kind of comfortable up there in the top. Jesus is all about me and what he can do for me. But when it comes time to giving an actual defense of the faith with reasons for what I believe, I can't really do that because I've spent all my time up here in feelings land. And then it's like, well, Jesus works for me. And what have we done? We just played right into that worldview. Cool. I can't tell you how many times somebody said, I'm so happy that works for you. It's like, and I did it. Like, how did I get there? Like, I know better than this. And somebody just said, I'm so happy that works for you. But people are pre-programmed to think that way. If it works, people, it works for everybody. If it's true for everybody. That's the point we're trying to make here. So we've got to resist that kind of feelings-based faith, okay? Take the picture of me in my quiet time with Jesus and put it on Instagram. It's fine, it's good. But it's not all about your personal relationship with Christ, because then unknowingly, we can play into that top shelf. All right, quick couple things to end up, and then we'll take our break. Let's look at the 3 worldviews again. Our friends, as it deals with truth, atheism would say that we can't know truth. Some atheists would say that there is no truth. We can't know truth because objective truth does not exist. And certainly that's not a Christian worldview. Some would say there's no such thing as objective external truth. Is this viable? What if somebody says there's no such thing as objective truth? What would you say? What? You're being objective. Absolutely. It's one of the easiest apologetic techniques you can do, right? There's no such thing as apologetic truth. Is that true? They're stuck because they just said it. They just said, I just declared that this was true. Well, you just declared an objective truth, right? Somebody did that to one of the leading atheists. It was really, really funny in a full room. It was great. What would selfism say? That truth is up to who? Truth's up to the individual. Truth's up to me. I determine what is truth. And this is what's known as expressive individualism. And again, I have Dr. Truman to thank for that. Truth is discovered by expressing your feelings and desires. So not only is it, and if you've kind of been tracking what has happened in our culture, it's not, we've moved beyond tolerating. We've moved well beyond tolerating. Now we're into you must celebrate what I feel, or else you're a bigot or a hater, or you don't see me, you don't recognize my identity, whatever the is. So truth is then if it's up to me, I have to express this truth, or else I'm not being true to my God, which is me. If I don't express my truth and you don't celebrate my truth, then I'm not being true to myself.
You know, it's actually worse than celebration. You have to participate.
Yeah, I would agree. It's participate in it, right? You have to be a cheerleader from the side or yeah. So we've moved well beyond tolerating and really even celebrating. You're right, Justin. No, we have to participate. And what drives the bus in that? Of course, feelings. Feelings drive the bus in that. The huge issue then is that truth becomes relative and subjective. Truth becomes relative and subjective. It's true for me, like Mel said, the book title by Elisa Childers, right? Live your truth. That's your truth. No, it's not viable. When the doctor walked in with the sheet of paper in 2020 and had that look on his face, and I knew he was going to tell me I had cancer, and he told me I had cancer, I did not say to him, well, that's your truth, bro. No, it's true. There's actually cancer growing inside me, right? No, the world doesn't work like this. So why have we gotten into this, right? You read a recipe for what you're going to do. Well, that's a bad example because I always fudge on the recipes and they don't really, there are more suggestions. And then I wonder why it doesn't turn out the way it was supposed to. But anything, medication, take 3 times a day with food. Nah, I don't think that's true. You got to submit to true. I always use the police officer example, right? You get pulled over for speeding. You were speeding. That's your truth. No, the world is built on objective truth. Everything works that way. So to say that truth is up to me is not compatible, again, with reality. What does Christian theism talk about? Of course, God is truth. God is recognized as the definition and source of all truth. Jesus said that I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus prayed in the high priestly prayer, sanctify them in your truth. Your word is truth. There is an objective standard, and that is God himself. Why don't people want to submit to an objective standard that is God himself? What are some reasons why? What? They don't want to obey, okay? Limiting. Yep, they don't want to obey. That it's hard. Can I get an amen? Yes, it's hard. Yeah, because if here's the real nature of it, right? Believing this, buying into this means that I'm not God. And what our country wants to do is say that we are gods. And we're the ones who determine right and wrong. And if I have to bow my knee to someone else and do what he wants me to do, then I just got a demotion. I just got kicked off the throne. And what if he tells me something to do that I don't want to do? What if he tells me to do something that is hard? I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. Because we think somehow it's going to be difficult. Well, it is. It's going to be worse for us. The reality is it's the best thing that we could do. To be in a loving relationship with our Creator and to do what he calls us to do is the best, most prosperous, healthy, joyful life that anyone could ever live. Because you are working in coordination with how God made you, not how you're trying to make yourself. And the people I talk to, when they talk about their lives and how they're trying to craft it, they're usually not happy. Because we make lousy gods. We do. God's the true God. And we're going to talk about how we get to know that God in our next session. Questions, comments, thoughts? Encouraging remarks. Diane.
A lot of people, to answer that last question you just had, a lot of people will say that the Bible is non-objective.
Yep.
You know, well, part of it might not be made up, part of it's historical.
Yep.
How do we really know, Jesus rose from the dead? So that's their argument.
Yep. And that's a perfect segue to our next section because we're going to talk all about the problem of Scripture. Yep. Anybody else?
Well, when you did the chart with the feelings versus reality, or faith versus reality,
Yeah.
it feels like our culture today, all their reality is based on feelings and irrational thought, right? So
When they want. And then they'll call on science to blame.
even the science is twisted to make
Yeah.
their argument, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I feel like Christians tend to go more towards facts, rational, and public inspiration than
Okay. Yeah.
culture is more based on feelings. And I feel like a girl today, so I'm going to be a girl today.
Yep.
But that's
Yep.
accepted as fact and reality.
Right. Right.
So to me, it almost feels like this thing is almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's constantly changing. Right. The biblical worldview is both. Right. We of course do have feelings. It is joyful to follow God. It is fulfilling. It is all of those things. But it's also truth and facts and what we know in God's Word. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's take 15 minutes, and then we'll start back up again at 10:15 ish.